Hello, I'm John Ward on behalf of Anglo Far East. In this special edition, we're going to be discussing international diversification and the role of gold in protecting wealth, not just for a few years, but for generations. And I'm joined first by Alex Stanzik, Chief Market Strategist for Anglo Far East. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, John. Great to be here. Very excited today because we have a very special guest. And today what we're doing is we have one of our generationally wealthy clients who's been willing to grant us an interview and talk about his views on international diversification, his views on gold, also a little bit about his views on Anglo Far East. This is a very special opportunity for us because to have someone who's an executor of a family estate of generational wealth being willing to share his views in a public interview about these kinds of topics is really a rare treat. So very excited to have that opportunity. And with that said, I'm going to hand it back to John to start the interview.
Well, thank you, Alex, and welcome to our guest, GP. Hello, GP.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be with you, John, and also honor with Alex as well.
Well, GP, you're the executor of a large family trust that has been in existence for several generations. Could you tell us how you see that role and what you regard as your primary obligations?
Well, I'd be happy to do so, and part of that might be beneficial to the audience, and I certainly want to thank the audience for listening in as well. A few years ago, John, I found myself in a situation whereby the circumstances in the economy and also in the political situation was dramatically changing. And it's been a very interesting journey to go back to that period of time and share a little bit of that with you because of the process by which I went through that I know that you want me to speak about. What I recognized was that there was a very serious storm clouds on the horizon, predominantly as a trustee in the financial markets and certainly monetary policies and interest rates and many other things that were beginning to change. We're going back to 2007. Actually, my role goes way back, way over 25 years ago. And as a result of that, I contacted the attorney, the family attorney, to begin to look at these concerns and had a conference call with him privately. And I asked him, there's some concerns or are there some considerations that I need to pay attention to because it seems to me that I need to do some due diligence on altering the current, I guess I would call it the portfolio and the management of the portfolio. And that took me on a direction that I think is important to share. And that was I began to look at, why these things were happening and the impact on the free markets. And I was very concerned about the cause and effect and the possibility of risk ramifications. And at the same time, I was not well informed on these trends that were happening. But here's how I took the case when I actually started to proactively do research, due diligence. I started to get involved in environments that I wasn't usually participating in. And there were two situations that caused me to act in a way that I called the threat assessment action regarding this dark storm and feeling and being aware that something was terribly wrong that needed to be corrected. And the portfolio at that time was in the traditional types of investments. They were in bonds, they were in cash, they were in municipals, they were in blue chips. And they had been in that role for a very long period of time. But like cycles of nations, cycles of economics, cycles of wars, and many other things, it appeared to me that adjustments needed to be made. So I was looking at the inflation factor, I was looking at the dollar debasement concerns, the stealth taxes that were happening, and a number of other factors that were reducing the productivity of the trust itself to a negative rate of return. And needless to say, if you're a trustee and you have responsibilities that I'll get into in a minute, it was important for me to determine what had to be done. But on the other hand, I was in a learning process. So there were two factors that I want to bring forward that you asked about. Number one was being in that role. how did I view that role, and what were the obligations that I had? Well, first of all, when I think you're governing other people's money, you're dealing with parents, you're dealing with beneficiaries, you're dealing with different factors of belief systems and different concerns. And under a legal responsibility of governing, as a stewardship, the responsibility of a management of something entrusted to one's care, you don't take that very lightly, and I didn't. And it was a concern on how I was actually going to move forward on this. So from a stewardship standpoint, I took the lead on the heart first and the legal responsibility, and also the approach to wealth management and the trends that were happening and the counsel of wisdom. So net bottom line on this is I did deep research. I started to connect with economists and financial experts, someone like a James Rickard, for example. I was looking for anybody and everybody, including Scripture and the Bible, to come up with a summary of what I felt were the threat assessments, and I listed them. The second part of the obligation had to do with the emotional and the spiritual side for me, and that was the capital preservation and growth by addressing the whole issue of threat assessment and the possibility of risk and to mitigate those risks. I see those today, as I did then, as the two critical factors.
I want to just pick up on one thing, and I want to make sure I heard you right. You said you addressed several factors. Did I hear you say you addressed the heart first?
Yes, I actually did, John.
And what did you mean by that? I'm very curious what you had in mind when you said that.
Well, there are three components: the way I view the world and the way I view my own personal behavior and relationships that I try to practice. And the first one is first the heart, then the head, and then the wallet. So I started with the heart to be sure that I was in alignment with respect, responsibility, honesty, truthfulness with my family members, both the beneficiaries as well as those that were getting up. And that's the reason why I started there, to respectfully gain their insights, their perspective in my conversations with them.
Well, that's impressive and intriguing. And I'd like to ask you about one specific dimension of the explorations you did, and that is international diversification, by which I mean owning assets in more than one jurisdiction. Did that become part of your strategy? And if so, how and why? And what kind of research did that entail?
Well, John, that's a very important question, and it's also one that I find in my sphere of influence and relationships and friends around North America and even internationally. What I've come to recognize is the following, and this I feel very strongly about, and that is that how can we, with family members or trusts or children, or anyone that is awake and aware, how could any of us come into that environment or live in that environment under the assumption that unacknowledged risk of putting everything into one jurisdiction, one environment, one political system, one banking system, one regulatory system, and actually assume or a guarantee, for example, in my role, or guarantee to their spouses or to their children in the legacy that we all want to leave. How could we continue to be in that mindset and assume that everything's going to be okay? We're going to listen to the mainstream media. We're going to listen to the political folks. We're just going to continue our journey, and we're going to say it's all going to work out. I think that's a very dangerous situation to be in. And it was one that woke me up in a very significant way. And it was something that needed to be pondered and really thinking about. And I thought to myself, even though I've traveled internationally since I was a kid, I really never thought about it in terms of wealth management or preservation of capital. So how can we ignore several of these very important factors that are happening right now? And how do we reduce the shield or increase the shield of guarding our assets? If we don't do that, then that puts us in a very dangerous and vulnerable situation, because we're not diversifying, we're not looking beyond the borders and getting educated and informed with the sovereign debt situation, which we are facing, and not only here in the United States, but with the possibility of insolvency, and many of us know that, but also in Europe and Asia, and particularly right now, Japan is on life support, and they're worse off than we are. So it caused me to begin the journey down that path as a family trustee for my parents, for the inheritance, and the game plan that was perfect for 20-some years. And it became imperfect. There are some real strong legal mandates as a trustee that have to come into place. In other words, vulnerability by doing the wrong things, especially if they're severe. So this is why I have been able to think out of the box in order to accommodate the internationalizing and diversification into multiple jurisdictions to provide safety, security, and of course also possibilities of growth and protecting the assets.
I noticed here, GP, that the word multiple, it would seem from what you're saying that every and any jurisdiction could carry some degree of risk. So how did you research the various jurisdictions and weigh the risks that each presented? Initially,
it was a very narrow consideration of options, and let me share with you, John, on a very brilliant question, how I went through that process. I had already started on a personal level to begin to invest in precious metals and hard assets. My background went into investing internationally, and because I was looking at real estate outside the United States, I was looking for commercial real estate. I was looking for trends that I became familiar with a lot of people, which is a great way to accelerate education, especially if they're honorable and moral and ethical people that have long histories of progress and success, along with the bad stories that they have. But it put me into an environment, and I think the key word there is to surround yourself and put yourself into the right kinds of people with the right moral compass, the right wisdom. So I went through a process of doing research with developers, doing research with entrepreneurs that had been involved internationally, and also I had done research by doing website research on key tags that would give me an insight. And as a result of that, moving ahead a little bit to your question, I narrowed it down to one country in terms of precious metals. And I know that there are many others. There's places to store and so on, but I narrowed it down to one, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. I was holding personal. I was not necessarily doing too much in the precious metals that would justify internationally, but that changed quite rapidly. So on a research basis, those tipping points, those points that I pointed out to you, were the ones that I invested a considerable amount of time from 6 a.m. to midnight. I was on a path to address the issue that I was called by my parents many years ago to take care of it and to be careful and to ensure that family members would be protected against, any kind of significant downside, which we know there are downsides. Did I answer your question, John, in a way that...
Well, you did, and I would like to know, if I may ask you, and it's up to you if you'd like to share this, which was that one jurisdiction where you placed the greater confidence?
Well, I had spent time in Europe and been on some travel trips and so on. So although I had not been there, it was Switzerland. And
which makes a lot of sense.
Yes. As it turned out, it was a tremendous blessing of having that preliminary background. But frankly, the firm of AFE opened my eyes substantially. And I know you want to talk about that a little bit later.
But let me ask you what it was that you saw in Switzerland, from your perspective, that gave you greater confidence in that jurisdiction.
Well, I'm a lover of history, and my family goes back to Europe and Germany in Great Britain, and I got a bunch of Scottish in me, and Ireland and so on. So that background in history of Switzerland was I was aware of, but the things that I saw there was the banking history, the difficulty of access from other nations that might have an interest in taking over the country. So we had the banking. I discovered that the precious metals. I was aware vaguely that there was a fair amount of refineries there, and their constitution was bulletproof. So those awarenesses were part of me confirming. And I did do research. So I got online. I went through political. I went through monetary. I went through wars. I went through a lot of things in the journey as I was moving more and more towards a hard asset precious metals shift out of the paper marketplace into hard assets.
Well, that's exactly what I'd like to ask you about next, GP. What prompted that shift, and what is the role of gold in your family's portfolio as you are managing it?
I think it's something that I want to bring through to you and Alex, and also to the audience, is risk mitigation was a critical factor. So the international diversification and owning assets that are safe and protected in a jurisdiction that has a long history of protection on multiple scales, and I'll expand on that in a minute. But it's very interesting today, John, to notice that the days of kind of the Americans in particular that are on automatic behavior, to the degree that just because they were born in the United States, there's this assumption that things are not going to change, that we're not going to experience some things that most of the world has experienced. And I think it's just a lack of education, lack of learning. But beyond that, I thought to myself, and this is the heart side, how can I tell my wife, for example, that all of the plans that we had been making over the years, moving into those golden years, and all the money would be just slipped away. And I'll tell you what, I cried over that. But just the idea, it wasn't my agenda, but it was certainly a thought that I saw in many women in particular that were not prepared. They didn't understand the financial risk and the political risk and the dangers that are currently there. So as I moved more and more into the security, if you will, so we have the danger of the dollar, we have the danger of political, it's influencing the dollar, monetary policy, and many, many other things that would extend this call in this conversation a lot longer, which I was prepared to do, John, by the way. It became a confirmation on my part. So let me share with you a striking contrast as I looked at other locations in the world in order to make the moves that have to be made. The nature of Switzerland is the first thing that caught my attention when I got introduced. And by the way, we made 2 trips down to meet with Alex, 2 different occasions, and we had a fairly long and in-depth conversations. I'm sure Alex will remember that the rest of his life because of the length of it and the detail of questions. And it's because I'd already spent a lot of time looking at a lot of other things, but I had to be sure. And I think the first thing that struck me the most, and still is in my head to this day, and that is to think outside the bank. And that just rang with me so huge, given all that's going on, has been going on, 2007, 2008, all the way up to the present, what's going on with the banking world by itself, and monetary policy and interest rates and everything else. That really rang with me. It connected with me. And the second thing had to do with the management team and having the opportunity to spend face-to-face with Alex, and also an opportunity to meet some of the other management were just down-to-earth, highly knowledgeable, and highly practical, and had a spirit of service, stewardship. And the other factor that came in was the ability to liquidate portions, should that be an issue. Global liquidity in multiple currencies was very liberating based on what I had already studied about other locations, storage, privacy, and it was completely outside the banking industry. That was impressive to me. The educational side of the crash course, which I absolutely loved and never knew that was any in it. And yet the crash course by Chris Martenson was posted in your website. And the website is very unusual and very, very accommodating to the average person or the person that's got a little bit more capital or whatever, but it's educational in format, and it's very insightful and very much an awakening experience. But I have to tell you, and a compliment to you, John, when just recently, I have to bring this in, the key custodial jurisdictional safeguards that you did a recording on, and it was fabulous. Just so clear, so understanding of, people go through difficulty in making decisions. And if we're not in this information today, I don't know where we are. We got to be on another planet because this is not the one. But it seems a very popular trend here that the world is full of disinformation, a lack of a moral compass a lot of times, and honesty and truth, and representing exactly what they are and what they're saying and what they're doing. That's very difficult today. So the compliment goes to the entire team in the history of AFE, because going through that process really clarified a lot of those concerns about confiscation. So it impressed me with Switzerland and the contract law, the Swiss private movable property, and the international law and Swiss law. There were so many things that you incorporated into that. It gave not just me, but it gave my wife a level of confidence and understanding. And this is one of the advantages. I see AFE as seeing the future in advance and preparing for it and accommodating by providing strategies and solutions that are very innovative, very unique, very exclusive, that are taking care of their clients, whether that they're institutional or mom and dad or whatever, an entity. But that is huge in a day of misinformation. And so my confidence has never been higher. And that's really why I was open to the idea of having this interview. And there's much more that I would like to share, but the point is the key list that was created, speaking about history, which connected to me, geography protection, I think military and legal I mentioned, and also the fact that they are neutral. These people don't think about these things. I didn't even think about wars or, another nation invading for oil. I didn't think that deeply. But the political stability in the world where political stability is really a serious threat to our wealth and to our savings and to our very way of life in North America, for example. So having those key safety factors and also the financial stability of never having a crisis. I don't want to take all your thunder there, John, but I'm going from memory on this stuff, but I can tell you that, if there was a benchmark, and I think there is, if the benchmark is AFE in all aspects, is a benchmark to start with, to investigate, to communicate with, to research with the team and understand the uniqueness here. And by the way, I'm not being paid for this, am I, John? I don't think so.
No, indeed you're not. And by the way, in terms of mastery of the Swiss story, all credit goes to, of course, to Philip Judge, who I was interviewing there, the founder of AFE. Let me ask you to step back one moment for a final question here. Thank you for your comments there. GP, you've gone on an extraordinary journey. I mean, from the beginning, you were really maintaining a traditional portfolio, I guess, based primarily in the United States, sort of Wall Street based, stocks, bonds, cash, and so forth. You've shifted over a course of 25 years, I think, to a really radically different organization of your family's wealth, with a significant portion of it in precious metals, with a focus on international diversification. Stepping back from that whole journey, are there any overall global insights or wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners who are concerned about the protection of their own wealth?
Yes, if I may, I'd like to add a comment to what you just said. I started in 2007 on a very aggressive pursuit of wisdom, knowledge, truth, trends. If you saw my library, it's huge. And because of that, I believe that I was called against my family to move forward based on the covenant that I was asked by my dad to take care of it on behalf of the family, mother, who was 99 now, to do that. Okay, I made a decision to go from a dangerous environment that was only going to get worse over time, and we go from 2007, we go up to the present today. It's almost like we can't even recognize the two time cells, if you will. There's so much change has taken place, so much more risk today. And in 2010, in the fall, I made the decision and began to move all of it, not all into hard, but in a number of different formats that were backed by precious metals, by gold. And that cost me on a relationship level, even with my openness and candor and truth and research and everything, it put a big concern, because they did not understand. They did not want to understand. They did not want to recognize the changes that were taking place in the world and the risk that involved, as much as I had done the education. And I've been confirmed on those decisions of over 25 individuals that are people I respect, admire. Actually, Alex confirmed the direction as well. So just so you know that what I did was controversial. But all we have to do is be informed. To your point, I would like to share this with everyone. Number one is to understand that gold is very critical to your financial life, because unlike stocks and unlike bonds and real estate, especially in North America, life insurance, what are the other things, annuities, paper money that is toxic, that has no value attached to it whatsoever, zero. And it doesn't say this is a silver certificate on the dollar bill. It has a different message, which is counter to everything that we believe in the Constitution. And even your business. It doesn't depend on any formal institution, certainly not on the government, the financial situation. The ugly irony, so to speak, of gold confiscation is that it's possible that it would confirm our darkest worries, that I think most of us are something's terribly wrong, and also about the government and the choices that they're making and the danger in their political agendas that are not really very favorable to the American people. And we're seeing that in Canada. It's not just America. I'm a patriot. I grew up I didn't come across on the Mayflower, but my family did. And I have family members that go back in history that supported George Washington and delivered meat, and were in the wars. So I'm a patriot as a patriot. And yet I just find that something was terribly wrong. So at this very moment, that the government is stripping off of us all means of being independent. So I wanted to give that warm-hearted message to everyone that's maybe listening to this and wondering, what should I do? That's a classic question for all people. What do I do? I know there's a problem. I can sense it. What do I do? My recommendation is to get to AFE and get connected and get educated and get informed, and don't waste a moment of time. So that would be from the heart. On a practical level, I think it's important to recognize that freedom is ultimately dependent upon sound money. So if we love our freedom, and I know we all do as human beings, it's really vital and necessary that you secure the audience, you secure your financial freedom with some of your own sound money that's valuable worldwide. When you look at the central banks, you look at the East, central banks are buying a lot of gold. India, China, Russia, and others. Why? Why aren't we buying? Why aren't we being challenged and encouraged by the government to buy gold, to buy silver, to protect against the global reset and the debasement of currencies? I've heard numbers ranging from 40 to 50 by economists, smart economists, insider economists, of 90%. Do I know that it's going to happen to that degree? No. Do I know it's going to happen soon? Yes. And so everyone that listens to this recording, this interview, I urge you to not waste any time. You'll get the education you need, you'll get the insight, you'll get the wisdom to reach out to this management team that has a heart and has a head and is passionate about service and contribution, making a difference in people's lives. I've never seen anything quite like it to the level or degree that they go.
Well, thank you, GP, for an extraordinary, illuminating conversation about your experience in managing generational wealth. And back to you, Alex.
Thanks, John. And also just want to give a heartfelt thanks to GP for his graciousness with his time and in being willing to discuss these issues, which are very obviously very close to the heart, and just being very candid in his research and his diligence in what he's looked at, and really just kind of sharing things that I think maybe some people are a little bit uncomfortable talking about, but do realize kind of in the back of their mind or sense that there are certain things that need to be addressed. But very few people have the courage to step up and really directly look at those kind of things and then spend the time and energy and diligence to do the real research necessary to find those solutions. So again, thank you, GP, for being on the call with us. And John, thanks for hosting as always.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, GP. Bye-bye.